Games get canceled every day. It's not something we, as consumers of that medium, like to hear about, but it is a permanent aspect of the games industry. With projects that cost so much and take so much time to make, it's just not rational to expect every project that gets started to make it to the finish line one day. Creative leadership positions change, business priorities shift, and of course, sometimes games just don't look like they're turning out well, and pulling the plug becomes more attractive than continuing to dump time and resources into it. While we may never know about many of the games that are started and eventually canceled, some of them we do. These are cases where a game was greenlit and began production and advertising, but for whatever reason, still never saw the light of day on PS3. Given that the PS5 is supposedly going to be easier to develop for than any Sony console before it, could we see some of these long-forsaken projects return in some form? Probably not, but you never know. And with that, here are 5 games that were meant to release on the PS3 but were unfortunately cancelled, and we would like to see revived on the PS5. Before we begin, please consider subscribing and enabling all notifications by clicking the bell icon. With that out of the way, let's get started. 1. 8 Days. 8 Days was a game that started off as a demonstration for what the PlayStation 3's cell processor could do. A console's ability to handle real-time physics and explosions while still looking good and running well was a big factor in this time. And that is exactly what the early build of 8 Days was aiming to do at 2005's E3. As Sony never lets a good tech demo go to waste, the concept was turned into a game to be developed by London Studio at some point, and was set to actually be pretty interesting. 2 different characters, one of which was more good than bad, while the other was more bad than good, would end up working towards their own goals in dealing with a powerful mob. Their paths would eventually intersect, and they would be tasked with working together. Over the next few years, early footage of shootouts and car chases would emerge, but the game was reportedly cancelled in 2008. Shuhei Yoshida would cite the game's lack of online functionality and how far away it was from completion, despite the many years of development, as part of the reason for its cancellation. It's a shame that this game couldn't get finished, as it did have a relatively interesting setting and couple of characters. With another couple of years and perhaps a change in leadership, this could have really been something, but I guess we'll never know for sure. 2. Coded Arms Assault. Coded Arms was a series started on the PSP by Konami, and it did a pretty good job of handling the limitations of that platform while still being a pretty good first-person shooter. Its sequel was just as good if not better, and it was eventually time for Konami's simulation shooter to make its debut on the PS3 with Coded Arms Assault. The game seemed to be coming along rather well, with decent-looking graphics and much bigger environments than the 2 PSP games ever had. It was even supposedly aiming to support 16-player multiplayer modes for those looking for that sort of thing, but alas, it was not meant to be. After a flurry of rumors and conflicting reports about the status of Coded Arms Assault, Konami would eventually confirm that they were no longer working on the title, and it was effectively cancelled. Given that it's been a decade and a half since then, it's probably safe to assume that the game and the series is more or less dead. 3. Agent.
We'd like to announce a new property coming from Rockstar North. It's called Agent, and it will be exclusive to PlayStation 3.
Agent perhaps generated more hype for itself than any other game on this list. Perhaps it was the pedigree behind it that garnered so much interest, as it was none other than Rockstar that were working on the PS3 exclusive stealth shooter back in 2007, as was teased. A couple years rolled by and we would see the game's official announcement in 2009. Then nothing of note until 2011, when it was confirmed the game was still in development and still slated to be a PS3 exclusive. The game was supposedly going to feature a Cold War-era setting and largely base its gameplay on stealth and espionage, but as more and more of Rockstar's resources were being reallocated to Grand Theft Auto V, it became more apparent that something was up with Agent. What that was, we will probably never know, but the United States Patent and Trademark Office declared that the Agent trademark had been officially abandoned, which is effectively telling us that the game was not ever going to be completed. Out of all of the games on this list, Agent might be the most disappointing one. While most games are canceled for a good reason, it's puzzling to think about what could have gone wrong with this particular idea. It seemed like it had everything going for it. 4. The Getaway 3. As Sony London was toiling away on 8 Days, it was also reportedly working on a third Getaway game. Reception to the franchise so far had been above average, but not spectacular. So perhaps that was part of what Shuhei saw when he became the boss of Sony Worldwide Studios and decided to cancel both projects. Not much was ever known about the game other than the fact that some who worked on the project have since admitted that it was well into its second half of development. It's a shame that this project ended before it could be completed, and what's a bigger shame is that it will likely never be revived. The open-world organized crime genre seems fairly galvanized around just a couple of franchises these days, so it's tough to think of just where a new Getaway game would fit in. 5. Killing Day. The era of the PS3 was very different for Sony than now, where you mostly see somewhat derivative third-person action-adventure games rising to the top on the PS4. The PS3 had a lot more variety in its library, with a higher percentage of its games being platformers, shooters, arcade games, puzzle games, and so on. As a result, more projects outside of the action-adventure genre were being developed, like Killing Day, a somewhat more grindhousey-looking first-person shooter that had the spirit of something similar to Wet or Max Payne, but with more environmental interaction. The announcement trailer released back in 2005 showed the main character shooting people off of balconies, taking out glass floors and causing the enemies standing on it to fall to their deaths, as well as plenty more stylish environmental destruction. The game was aiming to release in the later months of the following year, but never got its chance to really become anything more than that trailer and a moderate amount of hype. After a series of ons and offs for the copyright for the game over the next couple of years, the game was supposedly cancelled, although no official word on the game's status has ever been released from Ubisoft. Out of all of the games on this list, this is the one that I suppose could exist in some form somewhere, but that doesn't mean I would be holding out hope for seeing it return. Even still, this and everything else mentioned on this list would make interesting revivals for the PS5, and there's nothing wrong with keeping a little bit of hope in the back of your mind. And that brings us to the end of the video. A quick request: we upload new videos every single day, and if you like what we're doing, please consider subscribing. It really helps us out. Also, don't forget to enable all notifications by clicking the bell icon so that you can receive daily video updates. Thanks for watching.